Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here on Thursday, July 23rd with our Benny's Bat section for today. The idea of the Benny's Bat section is to give you guys an outline of a short list of players that you should be looking at today. What we try to do is we go through each pitcher one by one, figure out what that pitcher's weakness is, and then look at the bats that are going to be going up against them and try to figure out which of those bats is in the best spot to have a big upside day for us and help us win some of our tournaments. So let's get started. We only have a 7-game, We only have a 7-game slate today. So there's not a ton of stuff to go through. So we're going to go through each pitcher from every game today instead of just highlighting the best spots, because you're going to have to take a couple of these guys on your roster who might not be in the greatest matchups today because there's basically limited options at all these positions with only 7 games going on. First guy I want to talk about is Doug Fister going up for the Washington Nationals against the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's not a great hitter's ballpark here, so there's not a lot of guys that we want to take from this game on either side. But Fister has struggled. Right-handed bats are hitting .366 against him with a 1.80 whip so far this year. So there's a lot of right-handed bats in that Pittsburgh team that we can look at. Numbers-wise, the first guy that really stands out is Andrew McCutchen. He's got a 378 WOBA with a 221 ISO number. So he's a guy that's been, basically getting hits and showing a little bit of power. He's also prone to the 0 for 4 games as he's had lately. He's been playing injured for most of the season, and he hasn't really been the guy that we remember him being from years past and, his MVP caliber seasons from a couple years ago. But he is still somebody who's solid. He's in a good matchup today. Again, Fister's not a guy who gives up a ton of runs. He's usually pretty solid. This is one of the higher batting averages we've seen him have against right-handed bats. For some reason, right-handers are just hitting him really well this year. So if you're going to look at anybody on that Pirates team, I think you want to be looking towards the righties. But again, it's not a great ballpark. It's not a great place to hit. You can maybe look at a guy like Neil Walker. We got to be a little bit less picky because this is a short slate today. He's only got a 331 WOBA with a 146 ISO number. But when they play against right-handed pitching, he usually hits up second. So he could be in front of McCutchen today. If he gets on base, you got a chance for McCutchen to drive him home. So it's just something to consider. Sterling Marte is another guy. My problem with him is his prices come up all over the place. But I think all those guys are, guys that you have to at least look at and put on your short list when you're, doing your research later on. On the other side of this game, this is a tough one for me because Liriano's going up today. Now, Liriano's a guy who's been very good this year. Is not somebody I think we should be targeting against, but he had a neck issue that forced him out of his last start 15 minutes before he was ready to take the mound. Now, the problem I have with this is, there are a couple things that you really want to know. I mean, is he going to be 100% healthy? Is this something that 3 innings into the game, he's going to throw a pitch and he's going to throw it out again, and then they're going to have to go to the bullpen for 6 innings. If I knew Liriano was going to give me 7 solid innings against this Washington team today, I would think he's a good play, and I would also think you got to shy away from all these Nationals bats, basically. But again, I don't know how that's going to play itself out. Now, you also have to realize they don't have a lot of left-handed guys coming out of the bullpen over there in Pittsburgh. So when they do have to go to the bullpen, or if they do have to go to the bullpen early, they're going to wind up bringing in a right-hander. So you could go ahead and try to find some right-handed bats to throw up against Liriano. But if they go to a right-hander, or if he gets scratched, or if he gets, taken out of the game early because they just want to be cautious with him, you're probably going to have these guys getting 2 or 3 at-bats against a right-hander. So really the only guy on this team that I'm looking at today is Bryce Harper. Harper's got a 453 WOBA against lefties with a 292 ISO score. His scores are even higher if they do put in a right-handed pitcher. So that's why I think he's the one guy that is kind of safe to roll out. I also think he's going to be a very sneaky, very sneaky tournament option today, and here's why. Clayton Kershaw is going on the mound. Kershaw is like 14,500 on DraftKings. Excuse me. It's the most expensive pitcher on basically every site tonight. So if you're putting Kershaw in your lineup, you're not going to have a lot of money to spend up on bats. If you go after a big expensive bat like Bryce Harper is, you're probably going to be left with, basically minimum price guys at almost every position. So I think that in itself, the fact that I think Kershaw is going to have high ownership today, kind of precludes people from putting a guy like Harper in their lineup. You're not going to be able to build a lineup with solid bats that you like at every position if you go and get Kershaw and Harper. So I think that's going to help keep his ownership level down, which makes him a great tournament option on its own. It's also not the greatest ballpark to hit in, so that's going to scare some people away. And going up against Liriano, it's a lefty-lefty matchup. But again, Harper's numbers against lefties are better than most guys' numbers against righties. So even if it was a same-handed split, a lefty versus a righty or righty versus a lefty, like we usually look for, again, you want to look at the numbers. If Harper's hitting lefties well, there's no reason to fade him against a lefty. So I think Harper's going to be a guy that goes very low owned tonight and could have some big upside for you. So just keep that in mind if you're putting together tournament rosters and you're trying to think of a way to differentiate yourself. Putting Harper in your lineup is definitely something that can get you there. Next guy I want to talk about is Trevor Bauer. Bauer has a higher average and more home runs allowed over the last 2 years to right-handed bats. So he's more of a reverse splits kind of guy. This year, left-handed bats are only hitting 206 against him, where right-handed bats are hitting 243. So he's been really, really tough on lefties, and right-handed bats are probably the way you want to look. Now, that Chicago White Sox team doesn't have a lot of bats that you want to look at anyway, but with right-handed bats having a higher average and more power against them, I think the one guy who could be in play is Jose Abreu. Abreu has a 357 WOBA, 194 ISO number. And again, Trevor Bauer is prone to giving up some home runs. He's also a guy that's a high strikeout guy. He's one of those guys that throws hard, high strikeouts, gives up a few home runs every now and then. As long as he can limit them to solo shots, though, he's usually pretty good. Abreu is one of those guys, though, that can hit that home run. And again, for a batter, we don't care if our batter hits a solo shot. You hit a solo shot on DraftKings, it's 14 points. You hit a solo shot on, Fantasy Aces or FanDuel, you're getting about 6 or 7 points out of it. So, you'll take that from a guy who you're spending $4,000 from on one of those sites, or a guy who is less than $5,000 over on DraftKings as well. So if you can get that home run upside from Abreu today, I think he's a good tournament option. Again, I think he's another guy that's going to go a little bit lower owned and has the upside that you look for to really get you over the hump and win you a big tournament. On the other side of that game, we have Jeff Samardzija. Now, Samardzija's been getting knocked around by left-handed bats, which is not good going up against a Cleveland team that has a lot of left-handed regulars. Lefties are hitting 275 against him with a whip of 1.34 so far this year. So you got to look at a guy like Jason Kipnis leading off, playing second base. He's got a 424 WOBA against right-handed pitching this year. So his power hasn't really been there. He's been getting a lot of doubles. Not that many have been turning into home runs. But a guy that has a WOBA that high is going to be in a chance to get a couple hits. Batting on top of that order, he's going to get that extra at-bat that you look for, and, he's just a stud. So he's definitely somebody I think that should be on your radar today. The other guy who we talked about yesterday in the forum post, I said I've been watching him over the last week or so, and Michael Brantley is really, really looking good at the plate right now. He has averaged about 11.5 fantasy points over his last 10 games. Let's see, what else do I have written down at him? Oh, he's got a 367 WOBA, 168 ISO number. He's only 4,300 over on DraftKings today. He homered yesterday, had 33 fantasy points. In his last 6 games, he's got 4 games where he's got double-digit fantasy points. I think 7 of his last 10, he's got double-digit fantasy points. He's only been less than 7 points in one start. I mean, this guy is starting to get it together. He is one of the top 20 hitters in the league when he's right. The beginning of the season, he was a little banged up, so he really wasn't right. But he's got it going now, and he's looking really good at the plate. So while his price is still low, I think the Brantley train is one that you want to hop on, because in another week or two, if this guy keeps hitting the way he's been hitting over the last week or two, you're not going to find him at 4,300 anymore. He's going to be 4,900 or over 5,000 like he was for a good portion of last season and the beginning of this season. The other guy you can look at too is Carlos Santana. People usually think of Santana as the right-handed guy against left-handed pitching. But against righties this year, he's got a 358 WOBA with a 223 ISO number. So even when he's a switch hitter, and even when he's batting from the left side, he's still been showing some power and getting some hits this year. He's first base and third base eligible, so I don't know if I'd use him at first base today. But he is a guy that just tends to get overlooked because there are other options at first and third that people usually go with. But remember, we got a really short slate today. There's only 7 games, and there's a couple pitchers who we're definitely not going to be targeting guys against. So you have slim pickings, and, he could be a guy that can hit you that home run or get you a couple RBIs in the middle of that order and, help push you over the top in some of your tournaments today. I also think he's pretty safe cash game play. I didn't look at his price on every site, but his price has come down to the point where he's just a mid-range option. He's not somebody you have to pay up for. So he fits into your rosters nicely when you're trying to round them out. Next guy we can look at, the next game up is the Mets against the Dodgers. Now, Clayton Kershaw is going for the Dodgers. I am not touching anybody on the Mets. You have a left-handed pitcher who's probably arguably one of the top 3 pitchers in the league, pitching in basically the best ballpark in the league for pitchers. And he's going up against a lineup who isn't very good and just lost one of its biggest right-handed bats in Michael Kadire, who's likely going to be out this game too. You're going to see some names in that lineup today. The Mets are a pretty left-handed dominant lineup with their regulars. Guys like Lucas Duda, guys like Daniel Murphy, guys like Curtis Granderson. These are all left-handed batters. They might even get the day off today against Kershaw, because Kershaw is just so tough on lefties that there's no reason to throw lefties out there against them. So you might see names in that Mets lineup today that you've never even seen before. So you're going to give a weakened lineup to a guy like Kershaw in the best pitcher's park in baseball. I mean, there's a reason this guy's 14,500, and I still think he might be worth it today. But again, if you're taking any Mets, even if you just want to do it to be contrarian for a tournament, I just think it's a waste of money and you're just donating. So there are certain times when it makes sense to go against a stud pitcher, but this is not one of those times for me. On the other side of the game, though, I do think the Dodgers can do some damage against Bartolo Colon. Colon hasn't really pitched well in over a month right now. His starts have all been pretty pedestrian. He's been giving up a couple hits, a couple walks. His strikeout numbers are down. His runs allowed are up. He's given up a 307 batting average this year to left-handed bats with a whip of 1.40. Even right-handers have hit him well with a 268 batting average. So a guy like Justin Turner is going to be in play, even though he's a righty. With a 460 WOBA and a 279 ISO number against right-handed pitching, you pretty much got to play that guy when whenever he's in a decent matchup. And this is not, Bartolo has not been dominating right-handed bats, so this is definitely a decent matchup. But the guys who I'm more excited about are all the left-handers on the Dodgers. You got Yasmani Grandal has a 414 WOBA, 267 ISO number, so he's been hitting for average and power. Although I'm not too worried about the power today because Citi Field is not a place that sees a lot of home runs hit out of it. It's not an easy place to hit home runs. So I look at the WOBA a little more than I look at the ISO in a game like this because I'm not expecting a lot of home runs, even though Bartolo can give them up. We're not going to argue that fact at all. Adrian Gonzalez is the next guy. He's got a 396 WOBA, 272 ISO number. Another guy I think is in play, another left-handed bat you can look at. Andre Ethier should be batting around 6th in the order, 378 WOBA, 203 ISO number. So he's got some power. He's got some average. Should be in a good spot here. And even young Jock Peterson, 370 WOBA, 256 ISO number. Whenever he's in a good matchup, I think people get a little giddy and play him a little too much. For me, Peterson's a tournament play because, yes, the guy has a ton of power, but he also gives you a lot of those 0 for 3, 0 for 4 games with a couple strikeouts, which really kill you. On a site like DraftKings, the strikeouts don't hurt as much, but if you're playing on Fantasy Aces, if you're playing on FanDuel, if you're playing in places where you get negative points for a strikeout, yes, Peterson has the power to hit a home run or two, but he also has the free swinging ability to strike out a couple times, and that's going to hurt you if he keeps striking out like that. Next guy we want to talk about, going over to Kansas City, you got a guy like Chris Young going up there. And I'm always shocked when I look at this guy's numbers. I don't consider him to be an elite pitcher, but he's only given up a 231 batting average to left-handed bats and a 172 batting average to right-handed bats. Those are pretty elite numbers. Now, he tends to only go about 6 innings in a game, but when we're looking for bats to target against him, you also got to think about who is going to come in after he comes out of the game. And that Kansas City bullpen is pretty sick. So it's not like when he comes out, it's going to get easier for them and they're going to have, smooth sailing for the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning to get a whole bunch of hits. If he can get through 6 with the lead, that bullpen is very likely to keep that lead for him and shut the door. And, that would be a really bad day for the St. Louis Bats. Now, the only guy, again, the problem that Chris Young has is that he's a high fly ball pitcher. So he is prone to giving up a lot of home runs, but they're playing in St. Louis. St. Louis is not a ballpark that gives up a lot of home runs, just like Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City is for him. One of the reasons he's doing pretty well this year in Kansas City is when he pitches at home, he's pitching in a ballpark that's tough to hit home runs out of. So even though he's a fly ball pitcher, in that ballpark, it doesn't really hurt him. Think about the parks that he's been in throughout his career. This is a smart guy. He was in San Diego when he first started. Again, another ballpark that's good for his strengths, doesn't give up a lot of home runs. He went over to the Mets for a little while. Again, another ballpark that doesn't give up a lot of home runs, plays to his strengths. Now he's pitching in Kauffman Stadium for the Royals, and today he's in St. Louis. All four of those places are places that don't give up a lot of home runs, so we should be able to see a lot of those long fly balls turn into outs here for him today, and that's going to make him a pretty tough pitcher. The one guy on St. Louis who I think you can look at, and again, he's a cash game play, a guy I like in cash games, not going to use him because I don't love his tournament upside, but Matt Carpenter has a 372 WOBA with a 175 ISO number. So he is the one guy who I think I would roll out there. If, again, on the short slate, you got to take some warts. So if you want to look at a guy like Colton Wong, again, no, Wong's been hitting down in the order. It's not really a great play, but, second base is a limited position today. So he might be another guy that's in play. You like those left-handed bats against Young a little bit more. But again, he's been good this year. So it's not like, he's a guy that we really want to target heavy against. On the other side of that game, it's pretty much the same situation. I don't want to take a lot of guys going up against John Lackey because he's been really good this year, and he's been even better at home with an ERA below 2. He's given up about a 260 batting average to each side of the plate so far this year, and right-handed bats have done a little bit better than against him over the course of the last 3 years. There aren't really a ton of right-handed bats that I like on Kansas City. The one guy is really Lorenzo Cain. And Kane's price has come up to the point on most sites where he's just not usable because you're going to have to pay up the rate that you pay up for guys who are legitimate superstars. And I like Kane. I think he's a very good player. He's solid, but I don't put him in that category of superstar that I would be willing to pay up for. He doesn't have the upside all that often. He doesn't have the consistency that some of these other guys priced around him do. So, like I said, he's a guy who kind of profiles well, but I just don't think he's worth the money on most sites today. But for a tournament option, he's somebody you can throw in there because not a lot of people will, and he does have a pretty decent spot today. The other two guys you can look at are Mike Moustakas and Eric Hosmer. Both of them homered yesterday. They both got about 380 WOBAs and 175 ISOs against right-handed pitching. So this is a matchup that, doesn't scream stay away from either one of those guys, and they both could have a chance to have a pretty big game today. But again, targeting against Lackey is not something that makes a ton of sense, so I wouldn't take too many bats against him. Next guy you can look at is a guy like Wade Miley. Wade Miley has allowed a 268 batting average to right-handed bats and 8 home runs. Now, I actually talked about Miley yesterday because he was supposed to be the scheduled starter, but they switched him and, Joe Kelly, who actually had a decent start yesterday himself. Went about 5 innings. I think he had 5 or 6 strikeouts. Did give up a couple runs, 3 or 4 runs. But again, he was so cheap that it wasn't a horrible situation for you. But we're basically going to do the same analysis we did yesterday. I mean, the two guys that stand out most against Miley, you want to use right-handed bats. So you got a guy like Jose Altuve, 367 WOBA, 131 ISO, which isn't huge this year. But remember, this is a guy who hit over 400 against left-handed pitching last year. He sees the ball, hits the ball well against left-handers, so he's definitely somebody that's in play. Like him more for cash than I do for tournaments because he hasn't been homering a lot, even though he had one the other day. And he hasn't been stealing a ton of bases this year either, which is something that usually really helped his score. If he's not going to get you the extra base hits, he's not going to steal bases for you. You really need him to go like 3 for 4 or 4 for 4 to even come close to paying off his salary. And I don't know if that's something that you want to rely on a daily basis. The other guy I really like is Carlos Correa. Correa's been hitting left-handed pitching phenomenally since being called up. He's got a 419 WOBA, 309 ISO number, so he's got power. He can hit for average. He can steal a base. I mean, there's a million ways that this guy can score points for you, and he plays a position in shortstop that's almost impossible to fill with somebody that you really like. So I think it pays to go and reach up for him today. I recommended him yesterday because I thought he was going against Miley, and since they moved Miley to the start today, I'm recommending him just as strongly today. Hopefully you guys were able to get off him when they announced that Kelly was the starting pitcher. If not, I apologize. You don't like Correa as much against a right-hander, but against a left-hander with those numbers, he's definitely somebody you want to have in your lineup. From the other side of that game, you got Lance McCullers going up. Now, if you look at McCullers' numbers, he's giving up basically a 200 batting average to each side of the plate. So I'm not really jumping to roster any of these Red Sox guys. I mean, there's nobody who I'm really running out to take. The Red Sox are better against right-handers than they are against left-handers. The 3 guys whose numbers kind of stand out for you are Alejandro De Aza, but he's going to be hitting 6th or 7th in the order. They refuse to move him up despite how well he hits right-handed pitching. You got a guy like David Ortiz. Ortiz hits lefties well. I mean, Ortiz hits righties really well. As a left-handed bat, he's a guy that's got some power. His WOBA is around 360. He's got an ISO number over 230, so he could be in line for a home run today. But again, he could also strike out 2 or 3 times. And McCullers is, has been pitching phenomenally this year. And then the last guy is Hanley Ramirez. I mean, Hanley, he's been crushing lefties, but he hits righties very well too. Has always hit right-handed pitching well over his career, so he's another guy that I think you can put into play today. Those would be the guys that I would be looking at on the, on the Red Sox. But again, against McCullers, it's not really a spot where you think you want to be targeting guys. Kind of falls into that. I don't know if I would use McCullers today because his price is pretty high on some of these sites. But I do think he pitches decently, and I don't think that Boston's going to light him up. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of offensive firepower out of any of those games. Next game, here's a game where you could get some offensive firepower. Arizona against Milwaukee in Arizona. Got an 8.5-point run line on this one. Now, Arizona's throwing up a guy, Goodley, who's a young rookie. He's a right-handed pitcher. I'm going to be perfectly honest. You guys are going to have to do some homework because I don't know a whole ton about him. I was waiting to talk to Josh because I know he's usually up on all the pitching prospects. From what I know, I mean, this guy's not a very big prospect. He's just somebody that they're calling up to make a spot start. I could be wrong on that. Like I said, I don't know a ton about him. But there are some guys on Milwaukee that you like to target against right-handed bats. Gerardo Parra and Adam Lind were 2 guys who were basically auto plays before the All-Star break. Parra's got a 371 WOBA, 196 ISO number. He's been absolutely killing the ball, was absolutely on fire against right-handers before the break. So he's somebody that I think is in play, probably going to be leading off for that Milwaukee team. And this guy's just good. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. He's a very, very good hitter. Adam Lind is actually their best left-handed bat to go up against a right-handed pitcher. He's got a 404 WOBA with a 251 ISO number. So he's probably the guy who I think is in the best spot for a home run today as well. I really like Lind against the right-handers. He's been hitting right-handers very well his entire career. And this year, the numbers are really backing it up that he's somebody you really want to look at. The problem that you have is he's getting priced up like, almost in the Goldie range, like just a little step below him. And that's a lot of money to spend up for Adam Lind. When he's in the 43 to 4,500 range on DraftKings or the 3,000 to 3,500 range over on FanDuel, I think he's somebody you can put in your rosters. But when he starts getting up into the 4,000s on FanDuel and up into the the 5,000s on DraftKings, it's just tough for me to put him in there because you can spend up a couple $100 and get a guy like Goldie who's having an MVP caliber season. Not that Adam Lind's not having a good season, but like I said, you got to be conscious of the price that you're paying for some of these guys sometimes. Chris Davis with the K is also somebody who's been hitting right-handed pitching well this year. 371 WOBA, 220 ISO. And you could always look at guys like Braun and Gomez if they're in there. Both of them have about a 345 WOBA. Braun's ISO is a little bit over 200. Gomez is about a 175. But with Gomez, you get a little more stolen base potential than you do with Braun, although both of the guys are able to and do swipe a bag every now and then. I definitely like these Milwaukee bats. Other than the Dodgers bats, I think Milwaukee is the other team that has enough big bats that you can stack up in this one. And I think that those are going to be 2 of the more popular stacks tonight that you're going to see. For the other side of that game, you got Mikey Fires going up. Now, Fires is a guy who's a high strikeout guy, also a high home run allower guy, giving up about 260 batting average to each side of the plate. There's really only 2 guys that I'm looking at in this game, but I think that Arizona could be sneaky and actually score a few more runs, but I just don't know where to go with it. I don't like going against Fires because he is pretty feast or famine. When he starts walking guys, that's when he gets in trouble because he does give up those home runs. So if he walks a couple guys and then gives up a home run, he can give up 3 or 4 runs really quickly. So you want to look at the guys who can take him yard. The 2 guys who really stand out to me are Goldie. Paul Goldschmidt's got a 430 WOBA with a 247 ISO number. He steals bases, he hits home runs, he hits for average, he gets walks. There's nothing you can do. You pitch to this guy, he's going to hit you hard. If you walk him and put him on base, he's going to steal second and score when somebody gets a hit. He's pretty much one of the best weapons in baseball right now. He's the most expensive first baseman on almost every site, but it's worth it a lot of times to pay up for him because not a lot of people do, and he's been putting up some huge numbers this year. I don't think this is a particularly tough matchup for him, and again, he does have a chance to go yard as well. So I think you can put a guy like Goldie in your lineup. Definitely think he's in play today. The guy who profiles best against fires is David Peralta. Again, I think he got hit in the hand yesterday, though, so just see and make sure that he's in the lineup. He's got a 372 WOBA, 242 ISO against right-handed pitching. So depending on how that hand is, where he got hit yesterday, just, keep an eye on it. Make sure he's in the lineup. Make sure they're saying that he's fine. Because if that hand's hurting him and he's out of the lineup, then obviously you don't want to play him. And if it's hurting him and he's playing anyway and he's not able to hold the bat, that's going to be a problem too, especially when you're looking at this guy to hit for some power for you. Next guy we can look at is Tom Kohler. Kohler has about a 235 average from each side of the plate, so he's been pretty good this year. The one problem that he's had is he's given up a lot of home runs to left-handed bats. He's allowed 11 of them in 54 innings. Now, the problem I have here is what lefty on San Diego do you really want to take? I mean, the other day they had Yangervis Solarte hitting cleanup. Is he somebody that you want to take? He's a switch hitter. He hits from the left side, but his numbers, his ISO number, his WOBA aren't all that great. You can look at a guy like Yonder Alonso, but again, is Yonder Alonso somebody that you really want to put in your roster? What kind of upside are you getting from him? You put him at the first base position. Look at the guys that you're fading and giving up, to put him in there at first base. I mean, there's really nothing that stands out to me. Justin Upton does hit well against right-handed pitching, does have some home run power. Matt Kemp has been heating up, so he's somebody you can look at. But again, if you take a look at Kohler's numbers, you're going to see he's given up about a 235 batting average to each side of the plate or better. So if that's the best you're looking at, there are so many other spots that I think you can target guys. It's a bad hitter's ballpark. You got a pitcher who's, sneaky good. Kohler does get a lot of ground balls, so guys put the ball in play. He's not a high strikeout guy, so he's not somebody I would rush to put on my roster, but he's also not somebody that allows other teams to really knock him around, so he's not somebody that you really want to target against either. And when you think about how much that San Diego team has struggled, I mean, do you really want to put that guy in your roster? I know he's not going to be in any of mine. The last guy we're going to talk about, the last guy on the list today is Tyson Ross. Ross has allowed left-handed bats to hit 257 against him, which is okay. It's not horrible, but his whip is about 1.56 against left-handed bats. So on the Marlins, I mean, again, the Marlins, everybody's been targeting against them since they lost Giancarlo Stanton, but they've actually been decent. They haven't been horrendous. Derek Dietrich is probably my favorite left-handed bat on that team. He's got a 391 WOBA, 227 ISO number. He's been hitting the ball very well against right-handed pitching. He's been coming up with some big hits, getting some extra base hits, and his price is incredibly cheap all over the industry. So he's definitely one of those guys I think you can consider. I hate to do this, and I do it every time that they go up against a righty because his numbers are good, but I feel like he underperforms. But Justin Bour is another guy that you got to look at and consider. 367 WOBA, 238 ISO. I mean, those numbers are nothing to laugh at. Those are good power numbers. That's a very solid WOBA against right-handed pitching. So, those are two guys that I think you got to consider. Tyson Ross has only been going about 6 innings in his last couple starts. He's been getting about 5 or 6 strikeouts, giving up a couple hits, a couple runs. So they can get to him, and they could also get to the bullpen if they can get into the bullpen early in the game. Like I said, I don't love the Marlins. I don't think they have huge upside. But the left-handed bats are in play. I mean, even a guy like Ichiro or Yelich, where you can find them cheap, might not be horrible options today. But again, as far as bats go, I think you got to look at the guys in the Dodgers. You got to look at some of the guys we mentioned on the Brewers, and then some of these other guys that we talked about and some of these good matchups that you can fit in. I think that's probably the best way to build your cash game roster today. It's going to be tough to fit in any studs today because if you want Clayton Kershaw, you're paying $14,500 for him. And against the Mets in Citi Field, I think he's somebody that you want. So I think the way you want to try to go is maybe take Kershaw, but then for your second pitcher, maybe come down and take one of those cheaper options, one of those mid-range guys that you really like. Josh is going to do his pitching video for you. He might outline some of those guys that you might want to look at. I would kind of fade Liriano today, not because I don't think he's a good pitcher. It's just, the health issues kind of scare me. So he's not going to be somebody that I have, which means that I probably am going to be paying up for Kershaw and having some of my early rosters already. I can tell you guys right now, it's very tough to fit in some of the studs today if you put Kershaw on top. But again, I think that he's going to have such a big game that it's going to be tough not to use him for your cash game rosters. In your tournaments, though, I think you can go away from him, try to go a different way. Like I said before, fitting guys like Harper into your lineup, expensive bats that other people won't be able to fit in if they use Kershaw. Might be a way to get some differentiation. And if Kershaw has a bad game or just doesn't have a dominant game at that price, you might be able to find another route to get some of those points from pitching and make the rest of it up with your bats. So that's been our Benny's Bat section today from rotocurve.com. Thank you guys for joining us. And as always, stay classy, DFS.